you this morning. I've not been a particularly good Unitarian Universalist these past couple of weeks. Now that's a rather broad statement, of course. It could mean many things. Perhaps it means that I have been failing to, say, explicitly uphold the sixth principle. Or maybe it means that I threw a bag full of aluminum cans into the garbage instead of the recycling bin. Or I haven't listened to NPR at all through the month of October. So obviously I should clarify what I mean. In a widely read essay titled Guiding Principles for a Free Faith, Unitarian Universalist theologian James Luther Adams famously identified 5 tenets of religious liberalism. In that essay, Adams wrote that one of the 5 tenets, or one of the 5 smooth stones, as he called it, that one of the 5 smooth stones of religious liberalism is a belief that the resources, both divine and human, that are available for the achievement of meaningful change justify an attitude of ultimate optimism. In other words, according to Adams, one of the pillars of Unitarian Universalism is the virtue of hope. UUs are and must ever be a people of hope. And I must confess that my personal hope tank has been rather empty for the past couple of weeks. My engine has been running on fumes. I find myself feeling broken. And my brokenness flows from a sinking suspicion that right now everything else around me is broken, perhaps broken beyond repair. I'm not sure what recent event was the last straw that broke my back. Was it the despicable and deplorable acts of overt racism that we have seen of late, including right here in our own backyard, the UNF student video mocking black people, the KKK flyers recently distributed across Jacksonville neighborhoods? Or maybe it was seeing on the news the full scope of the devastation facing the people of Puerto Rico right now, and the realization that there is no immediate end in sight to their suffering. Perhaps it was discovering that, including the hurricane that nearly destroyed Puerto Rico, we have seen more hurricanes in the Atlantic this year than we have seen in over 100 years, dating back to the 19th century. Another reminder that our Earth is heating up, and the damage we have already done to our planet may be irreversible. Or perhaps it's the very real threat of nuclear war with North Korea. Perhaps it was the California wildfires. Perhaps it was Niger or Somalia. Perhaps it was Las Vegas. It may have been Las Vegas. Not that the Las Vegas shooting was any more tragic than anything else I have listed or could have listed. But the Las Vegas shooting earlier this month is when I explicitly realized that I had lost much of my own sense of hope. Immediately following news of the shooting, I sat down in front of my computer and contemplated writing something, perhaps a lamentation to share on social media, maybe an expression of condolence to all who had lost loved ones, or a message of encouragement and a call to action to my church. But try as I might, I could not write a single word. And that's pretty bad when you know how loquacious a person I tend to be. Frankly, that's the primary component of my job, marshaling the right words together for the right occasion. That's kind of what I do for a living. But the Monday following Las Vegas, there was nothing to say. Nothing more to say, that is. The problem, the greater tragedy of it all, was that all of the appropriate words, all of the sorrowful words, all of the angry words, all the calls to action, all the thoughts and prayers, stretching back for years and years, they have all been said already by so many times, over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And all these perfect, beautiful words over all these years have changed precisely nothing. So in the shadow of the Las Vegas shooting, it seemed to me that re-employing, recycling these once powerful words, these once meaningful words, now bereft of their soul, effete by way of their vain repetition. It seemed to me that that was a special kind of blasphemy, an abomination of desolation that I would rather not engage in. And so I said nothing. I said nothing because I realized that I honestly have more hope right now that we can reverse global warming and stop the next hurricane than I have hope that we as a nation can stop the next mass shooting. That is to say, I really have no hope at all. So right now, I feel like a pretty crummy Unitarian Universalist. Or maybe I should feel like a really good one. Hope aside, another aspect of Unitarian Universalism is our embrace of reason and rationality. In the same essay that I cited earlier, James Luther Adams also noted that religious liberalism depends on the principle that revelation is continuous. One way historically that religious liberalism, including Unitarian Universalism, has embraced this idea is by recognizing that truth through the disciplines of science, hardwired into our theologies and responsible search for truth. So what I'm getting at, though, is that maybe my despair right now is actually a part of my faith. Because part of our faith is honestly accepting the truth as it is, not as we wish it to be. And so perhaps rational hope for the future is simply no longer warranted. At this time, perhaps logic suggests pessimism, not optimism. Because much like an experienced chess player can see when checkmate is inevitable, if not imminent, we can all see, if our eyes are open, that the game is all but over. Unless we are playing the wrong game. That is the exact thought that struck me earlier this week as I sought to replenish my depleted reservoirs of hope by going back to that corpus of ancient wisdom that has seen me through so many other dark hours in my life. I am referring, of course, to the Bible. Did I say Bible? Star Trek. I meant Star Trek. The mythology and theology of Star Trek has become more and more meaningful to me the deeper I have the Bible. To the Bible. To the Bible. Logic, Captain Kirk. Just as the Enterprise and the TV series needed both characters to fly, Unitarian Universalism needs both rational logic and irrational hope to change the world. I could choose a story from any number of episodes of Star Trek to illustrate my point today, but the one that I would like to focus on briefly, the one that I happened to re-watch this week, was an early episode of the original series called The Corbomite Maneuver. In that episode, the Starship Enterprise encounters a hostile alien life form with far superior technology and power bent on destroying the ship. After diplomacy fails, the Enterprise exhausts every option to escape, but they can neither overpower, nor outrun, nor outmaneuver the alien threat. Facing their inevitable destruction, the ever-rational Spock declares, "In chess, When one is outmatched, the game is over. Checkmate. But Spock's gaming metaphor gives birth to an idea within Kirk, leading Kirk to reply, "Not chess, Mr. Spock, poker." Kirk saves the Enterprise by concocting a complete and utter lie. He informs the alien that the Enterprise is laced with an undetectable element called corbomite, and that this corbomite will detonate should the Enterprise be attacked, thus destroying everything in its immediate vicinity, including the alien. If life is like a game of chess, then perhaps those of us representing the forces of human progress, the forces of justice for all, the forces of collective liberation, perhaps we are all facing checkmate right about now. But maybe the game isn't chess. Maybe it truly is poker. And in poker, as every poker player will universally tell you, the hand you are dealt is not determinative of whether you will win or lose. That is to say, it's not the hand you're dealt, it is how you play it. And sometimes you call a bluff. At the end of the day, maybe that's what hope is. A bluff. Maybe at least, sometimes, hope is an irrational and beautiful lie that we strive to make true. And in the striving, we find, if not our ultimate salvation, at least our redemption. I used to be an English teacher at Rains High School here in Jax. And if you know anything about Rains, you'll know that several of the students in that school are considered at risk because they daily face the challenges of living in impoverished neighborhoods with high crime rates. Sometimes schools like Rains are labeled chronically underperforming. But when you consider the challenges and hardships that Rains students face every single day, yet still make it to school and eventually graduate, to me it's nothing short of ignorant and racist to say that those students are underperforming in any way at all. One year I was teaching AP, or Advanced Placement English, at Rains, and my AP students, 11th and 12th graders, to be quite frank, they had no hope of passing the AP test. The average Lexile reading score for my AP 11th and 12th graders was about 4th or 5th grade reading level. In spite of all of our hard work and preparation, we all knew, me, the kids, the other faculty, that these kids were not likely to pass this test. They had no rational hope, especially after we had just taken the final practice test and none of them had passed, just as none of them had passed any of the previous practice tests. I saw and felt the hopelessness in their hearts, a despair so dark and deep that it threatened to stop them from even trying anymore. And so I told them a story. It was a stupid story. A story that quite clearly could have never actually happened in real life. But it was a story that was once told to me long ago in a dark time, and for one of those bizarre reasons I can never fully explain, it's a story that I have failed to forget. So I gave this story as a gift to my hopeless students. It goes like this. Once upon a time, there was a frog who lived in a kitchen. One day, he accidentally fell into a tall, boiling pot of buttermilk. Try as he might, the frog could not jump out. The walls of the pot were too high, and the temperature kept on increasing. The frog knew that his death was imminent, but he refused to give up. He kept swimming, kept kicking his legs, kept trying to jump, even though it was impossible for him to get out. But as a result of all his motion in that boiling milk, all that churning, he eventually ended up churning a small block of floating butter that he was able to leap off from and thus escape the pot and certain death. Now, my students rightfully recognize that this story was pure bunk. But they also understood and accepted its truth. Never give up. even in the face of certain failure. Never, ever give up. The simple act of trying may open invisible doors or create new paths you could not have otherwise imagined. To this day, nearly a decade later, many of my former students are still in touch with me, and many of them will still reference that stupid frog story. But that's not the end of that story. Immediately after my students took the AP English test, on the same day, the proctor of their test pulled me aside in the afternoon and told me something. She said, "Hey, Mr. Baber, I just wanted to tell you that I was really impressed with your kids." I asked her why. She said, "Most of the kids during an AP test here just randomly fill in the dots, then put their heads down on their desks until time is called and they are allowed to leave. But your kids kept their heads up and were working until time was called." Now, if this were a Hollywood movie, I could stand here and tell you that all of my kids passed that test. Cue the big, beautiful orchestra music. So that didn't happen. But against all odds, one of my students did, in fact, pass that test. And I later found out that the rest of her class, though they did not pass, they did score the highest average on an English AP test that Raines had seen in years. As I have considered again all of these stories in preparation for my sermon this morning, I have been reminded that even in the darkest night, hope remains. So my Unitarian Universalist faith is a faith of boiling frogs, of Captain Kirks, of tenacious kids from hard neighborhoods refusing to give up. It is a faith captured in the words of poet Adrienne Rich. "My heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. Yet I have to cast my lot with those who, age after age, perversely, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world." My beloved community, I cast my lot with you. Let us hope. Let us hope with our hearts, fearlessly, and let us reconstitute this broken world. Let us boldly go. Blessed be.